Were you surprised by the outcome of the Tolley investigation into Dominic Raab, where 2 bullying complaints were upheld against him? Did it surprise you?
No, because as we're discussing, he was a tough boss. And when tough is the everyday setting, it's not a surprise that that person oversteps the line. And clearly, in at least one case, Mr. Raab overstepped the line.
So did you, given the nature of how you saw him operate, think that it would escalate, if you like? What was tough maybe back in, when were you working with him, in
19 to 20.
19 to 20, that it would build into something a bit more? That was what you felt, that if he wasn't kept in check?
Well, one aspect was talking to him about his impact, the impact of his behaviour on the people around him. And I did that. They were not easy conversations, but I wanted him to see that how he was treating the people around him was affecting the outcomes, it was affecting his productivity, his delivery. And he resisted that.
Okay.
And he consistently resisted that.
So you raised his behaviour with him before it got to the stage of bullying, but he didn't accept your, what you would say, constructive criticism or advice.
Correct. Dominic Raab is a lawyer, and so everything was subject to quite forensic analysis. So a general conversation was not a successful conversation.
So just to be clear, Simon, you're saying that more junior civil servants said to you, I'm finding working for Mr. Raab really difficult, this has happened or that's happened, please can you talk to him about it, but don't mention me, and you tried to relay that, and he didn't accept that?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you surprised that he didn't accept that, or dismayed?
Dismayed, because I think that he was in control of his behaviours. I think he could have changed his behaviours, and he chose not to change his behaviours.
Did you like working with him?
That's my answer.
You didn't. You don't have to, I mean, you don't want to answer.
Whether a permanent secretary likes working for a minister is beside the point, because our job is to help our political boss deliver.
And Simon, you talk about trying to talk to him informally, reflecting some of the concerns from your team. You say that he deflected complaints because he didn't have specific names and examples. You've explained why. Do you, looking back on it now, regret not escalating it yourself before it got worse, before it got to a stage where, when you read the report, did you think, oh, maybe I should have done more?
I did reflect because I never used the word bullying in my conversations with him, but at the time it felt as though we were trying to avoid that level. Given what happened in my year with him, I feel uneasy, but I still understand what I did.
Do you think he should apologise for his behaviour now?
Yes.
You do? And were you dismayed that he didn't?
Yes.
Okay. Now, he didn't apologise, and actually there's been lots of discussion over the weekend about what the case means for the relationship between the civil service and government ministers, and Dominic Raab has got his view across very clearly with a series of op-eds he's done for newspapers. He did a couple of interviews. He's written a very clear resignation letter in which he said the outcome sets a dangerous precedence for good government and encourages spurious complaints against other ministers. What do you think of that?
I disagree with all of that. I think anybody who reads the report will see that the threshold is a high threshold, and so most people who have a bad day don't have anything to worry about, because if you have a bad day, you recognise it, you apologise to the person you've interacted badly with, and you move on. And as far as I can see, there will be no stampede of such complaints. So we'll see. But I think he's wrong about that. And I think he's wrong about the civil service. I think the civil service it defines itself by its impartiality, defines itself by how hard it works for government ministers. And in another part of his reaction, Mr. Raab does pay tribute to many, indeed most, of the civil servants he worked for.
Rory Stewart, whose political career saw him work as a civil servant and later as Secretary of State for International Development, said in recent days on his podcast that he, quote, did frequently find times where people, civil servants, were deliberately blocking him. I mean, this is part of Raab's criticism, wasn't it? That he felt that there was an activism within the civil service that were trying to block him and then trying to oust him. And there's another, minister there, Rory Stewart, who's saying the same thing.
I think that ministers are frustrated by aspects of the civil service. They are frustrated that they don't immediately get the point. They are frustrated when action doesn't happen as quickly as they want. You do not need to intimidate or humiliate or threaten stuff in order to shift the system. The system, I think, has, on balance, delivered for the United Kingdom.
The former head of the civil service, Lord Carslake, warned today that the Prime Minister needs to speak out against the torrent of invective against the civil service.
I agree. I think the Prime Minister, who is also the Minister for the Civil Service, he knows the civil service. He is surrounded by civil servants in Number 10 and the Cabinet Office. He knows their ethos. He knows their quality. So I hope that the Prime Minister and other ministers do publicly recognise that.
What I saw in his acceptance letter of Mr. Raab was immense sympathy with Mr. Raab as Mr. Raab railed against the civil service.
I think I would distinguish sharply, if I were the Prime Minister, between personal sympathy with a colleague I'd worked well with, I liked, and systemic sympathy. I think the system needs a closer attention than just accepting Dom Raab's word.
Let me put it another way. Are you concerned that if ministers and the Prime Minister doesn't come out to kind of stick up for the civil service, that the civil service will be unfairly vilified by all of this?
That is a possibility, because one aspect is the silence of civil servants. That a debate can rage about them without any serving civil service participation. So that, I think, is an unfair debate, and that is another reason for me, as a retired civil servant, to speak out, because I worked for the civil service for 38 years. The characterisation given by Mr. Raab, I think, is flat wrong.